Welcome back to History on a Hog. I'm Cap'n Boz. I've been looking into the mysterious airplane disappearance of Le Sol Blanc, or the White Bird, and its two famous French pilots, Charles Nungesser and Francois Colli. It was the only European aircraft entry into the great aviation race of 1927. It was a race to be the winner of the first non-stop flight between New York and Paris, or vice versa. The White Bird departed Paris on May 8th and was expected to arrive in New York on May 9th, but she never made it. Obviously, she crashed. But where? Most researchers believe she crashed into the sea, but many theorize she may have crashed in southern Newfoundland, or perhaps, according to many witnesses, in down east Maine, in the vicinity of Round Lake, near the Canadian international border. So I decided to head up to Round Lake to take a look around, and to pay my respects to the lost airmen. In Part 5, I told you of the many eyewitnesses who claimed that they thought they heard an airplane on that foggy morning of May 9th. But no one actually reported seeing an airplane. Some hunters came forward claiming that they had come across some airplane wreckage near Round Lake, including an airplane engine. But in the ensuing years, no one has actually found anything of the plane. So, the question today is, could any part of the plane have actually survived after all these years? And could it still be out there? After 93 years?
At this point in aviation history, airplanes were made of mostly wood and cloth, and very little metal. Today, the only thing left of a plane built in the 1920s that might be found would be the engine block and perhaps some bits of metal wire that might have survived after all these years. 99% of a plane made in that era would have totally decomposed by now, so finding anything on the ground today would be next to impossible. But over the years, there have been several attempts made by some very famous people to find the remains of the White Bird.
They would include names like Robert Ballard, Clive Cussler, and Ric Gillespie of the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, or simply known as TIGHAR. You probably have heard of Robert Ballard, the famous marine scientist and explorer whose underwater search expertise has led to the findings of several famous shipwrecks, including locating the German battleship Bismarck and President John F. Kennedy's PT boat in the South Pacific, the PT-109. And of course, he is most famous for as the man who found the remains of the RMS Titanic off of Nova Scotia. Ballard provided technical assistance to TIGHAR and its chief, Ric Gillespie, in conducting a scientific and thorough search for the White Bird at Round Lake. Ballard was also instrumental in providing guidance and technical assistance to Gillespie and TIGHAR in their quest to find out about the mysterious disappearance of Amelia Earhart in 1937. In fact, I believe Gillespie and TIGHAR succeeded in solving that mystery. But that's another story. So in the fall of 1987, Ric Gillespie and TIGHAR, with the assistance of Ballard, went looking for the White Bird in Maine, near Round Lake. He had heard about the stories of hunters seeing an engine in the woods near Round Lake. After several expeditions searching for clues in these Maine woods, he announced that his team had discovered a narrow piece of wood that may, and I stress may, have belonged to the White Bird. But Gillespie knew that this minuscule piece of potential wreckage wouldn't convince many skeptics. And he would be right. The wood pieces having convinced many. And that's all he found. No other wreckage, no other engine block, no trace of the pilots. But Gillespie and TIGHAR did accomplish an extensive search around Round Lake. And even though their search efforts failed to find any further artifacts, they may have proven that the Whitebird did not crash in down East Maine. There would be another famous explorer who would go looking for the Whitebird in Maine, Clive Cussler. Many of you know Cussler from his many adventure novels he has written over the years, but he was also a real-life explorer. In 1979, he founded the National Underwater Marine Agency, or better known as NUMA, a non-profit organization that looks for historically significant shipwrecks, and an organization that Cussler often refers to in his books. Cussler had also taken an interest in the Whitebird. He had been to Round Lake several times over the 1980s and the 1990s, trudging through the mud and thick forests, and even using underwater sonar to search the lake bottom. He was convinced that the plane went down into the lake, but unfortunately, he never found any evidence of the Whitebird in the lake.
This has always been my theory, that the aircraft and crew crashed into Maine, specifically here at Round Lake. The aircraft broke up upon impact, killing the crew instantly. And then it all slowly sank into the lake mud bottom, never to be seen again.
I agree with Cussler and Gillespie. I think they crashed into Round Lake. So here's my theory. I think that the Whitebird successfully crossed the North Atlantic Ocean during the night of May 8th, and that they successfully found the Newfoundland North Shore at first light the next morning. And then, as planned, they made their course correction to the south, towards Cape Cod. But as the eyewitnesses stated, there was a bad storm during the early morning of May 9th, and the weather turned very bad, especially for airplanes. I believe that the crew tried to circumvent that early morning storm somewhere over the ocean between Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. And then, as they got past the storm, they encountered low cloud ceilings and fog, which obscured the ground, which led them to get disoriented.
I base my theory on what I have read from the eyewitness accounts and from the research that I have conducted. But I also draw from my extensive flying experience in all kinds of aircraft and in all kinds of weather. I've flown low and slow at treetop level in foggy weather many times, and it's downright scary. Given all this, here's what I think happened.
After reaching Newfoundland and turning south, they were required to fly around that storm I mentioned, which was probably located in an area around southern Newfoundland. But another problem was entering their minds. Remaining fuel on board was getting low and was now becoming a very serious concern. They probably had to use a lot of fuel getting around that storm. By now, they were flying in and out of clouds and over foggy weather, so they couldn't see the ground or water. I think they figured they were somewhere over the west coast of Nova Scotia. But they were guessing, and they were running low on fuel. Significant fear and anxiety was probably setting in about now. And so, in desperation to get their bearings back, they decided to blindly turn west and cross what they perceived to be the Bay of Fundy. By turning west, they probably hoped they would outrun the fog and find the Maine coastline and get geographically reoriented on their maps.
Given this situation, I would have made the same decision. But as they turned to the west and crossed the Bay of Fundy, they probably lost all visibility and got spatially disoriented, which is just another fancy word for vertigo. Vertigo is incredibly debilitating to pilots and is extremely dangerous. Without visual cues or modern attitude indicators, they would not know whether or not they were right side up. As they struggled to keep the airplane under control and keep it from spinning, they probably wandered over the Maine coastline without realizing it and began drifting well inland near Machias, Maine. Now flying very low and slow, at treetop level and with very poor visibility, they would have realized they were lost.
Modern aircraft instruments like the attitude indicator, altimeter, and turn indicator that assist pilots in keeping the aircraft level and under control when they are in the clouds and can't see the ground hadn't been invented yet. Unfortunately, these kind of spatial disorientation types of pilot loss of control accidents were happening with too much frequency during this time, and the pressure was on the aviation industry to make flying much safer and more reliable during bad weather. It wouldn't be too much longer before the attitude indicator would be invented by Jimmy Doolittle in 1929, 2 years after the Whitebird disappearance.
I believe they knew they were in a very dangerous situation, and a sense of dread and panic would have begun to set in. The pucker factor had to be incredibly high. So I think they came to the conclusion that if they wanted to save their lives, they needed to land immediately on a nearby pond or lake. Remember, the Whitebird had no wheels. It was a seaplane, so it needed to land on water. So I figured that their plan was to pick out a nearby lake and land. Once they safely landed, the crew would wait out the fog. And when the fog lifted and the visibility improved, they would take off again and resume their flight. That's what I would have done if I were in their shoes.
The story will continue when you come back for part 7. I'll tell you what I think happened to the Whitebird and wrap up the series. See what fate awaited Nungesser, Coley, and Le Sol Blanc next time on History on a Hawk.